Isang malusog at mapagpalang hapon po sa lahat ng nakasubaybay ngayon sa ating Kapihan with Media via DOH, Facebook at YouTube pages sa saan mong bahagi ng ating bansa. Ang inyo pong lingkod mula sa Kagawaran ng Kalusugan, ako po si Lynn Legarteja na nag-aanyayang halika na't makinig, makibahagi at matuto sa mga eksperto ng kalusugan. Pero bago po tayo opisyal na magsimula, let me first read our house rules. To ensure the smooth flow of this session, everyone is encouraged to 1. Use the naming convention below for Zoom usernames to ensure proper acknowledgement. 2. Pay attention to the discussion of our health experts and or resource persons. 3. Keep your microphones muted while speakers are discussing and presenting. Should you have questions, participants shall signify and send them in the Zoom chat box and wait for the host to acknowledge them. There shall be an open forum after the discussion and submitted questions will be addressed first by our experts, followed by the Zoom chat box questions. Every participant is also advised to reserve questions. Only questions related to the topic discussed will be entertained. Lastly, please join the Kapihan with Media until the last part of the session. Ngayon pong buwan ng Pebrero, hindi lamang po natin sineselebrate ang Heart Month, kundi atin din pong ginugunita ang Intellectual Disability Week in accordance po with the Proclamation Number 1385 Series of 1975. And the goal of this proclamation is to promote awareness about the special needs of those individuals with intellectual disabilities. As we celebrate this, atin pong pag-uusapan ngayong Kapihan with Media, the intellectual disability. And to discuss with us the intellectual disability awareness and transition to adulthood, we are blessed to have with us today a director for local international advocacy of the Philippine Association for Intellectual Disabilities, who is also the Philippine representative in Therap Global and a school administrator at St. Philomena School. Please help me welcome Engineer Alfonsus de Alban. Hello po, good afternoon, Teacher Al.
Good afternoon, Lynn.
Yes po, the virtual floor is now yours po, Teacher Al.
Thank you, Ma'am Lynn. Let me just work this one out.
Sure po.
Let me share my screen with you. Can you see it now?
Yes po, but papindot na lang po yung slide share.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Magandang hapon. Ako po si Teacher Al, Director for Local and International Advocacy of Philippine Association for Intellectual Disabilities. Our organization was established way back 1973 and was formerly called Philippine Association for the Mentally Retarded or PAR. Tulad na sinabi ni Ma'am Lynn kanina, we are celebrating the National Intellectual Disability Week from February 14 to 20. This is by virtue of Proclamation 1385 Series of 1975, which was signed years back. Isa sa connected or part ng National Intellectual Disability Week ay yung tinatawag na Camp Pag-ibig, no? It was also institutionalized 1976. Usually every second Sunday of February yung pinakamalapit na Sunday sa Valentine's Day, sineselebrate natin yan. We have a 3-day camp activity, usually dito sa La Mesa Dam with children from all over the NCR participating. Coincidentally, in 1975, there was a declaration on the rights of the disabled persons held by the United Nations General Assembly. And among all those statements, I would like to share with you, for awareness, the one which I believe is one of the most important statement dun sa declaration ito, which states that, I quote, disabled persons have the inherent right to respect for their human dignity. Disabled persons, whatever the origin, nature, and seriousness of their handicaps and disabilities, have the same fundamental rights as their fellow citizens of the same age, which implies first and foremost the right to enjoy a decent life, as normal and as full as possible. Among all the disabilities listed on the National Council on Disability Affairs, those with intellectual disabilities are the ones who we can be said the marginalized of the marginalized. Ano po, sila po yung may pinaka nagkakaroon ng kakaunti na na awareness or napapabayaan sila, and that's why we're very happy to celebrate the National Intellectual Disability Week so that for awareness ang ating mga kababayan through this platform na ginawa ng DOH ay maipahatid natin that there is a week that is dedicated para magkaroon ng awareness, magkaroon ng patuloy na kaalaman tungkol sa ating mga kababayan na may intellectual disabilities. Ngayon, under the kung kukuhanin natin ang data no sa NCDA, makikita natin dito na ang more or less recorded na number of cases ng disability dito sa ating bansa ay nasa 1.4 million, ano, at 93,000 of that is yung mga merong intellectual disability. Of course, mahirap sabihin na ito yung actual dahil kung titingnan natin ang data, majority of this 93,000 is coming from regions 4A and NCR. Does that mean na merong dito yung sentro kung bakit maraming may intellectual disability? Hindi naman po. Nagkataon lamang na siguro dito sa NCR at saka sa Region 4A, nagkakaroon ng mas magandang data collection. Kaya nagkakaroon tayo ng mas mataas na recorded. So going to the topic of this discussion, yung transition to adulthood, malalaman natin na napakahalaga ang numbers because these numbers would help us sa education ng bata. There are two options kung titingnan natin para sa transition ng batang may intellectual disabilities. Nandyan yung Department of Education ng K-12. Kaya lang sa atin nakikita, ang focus ng karamihan ay sa academic lamang. So tuloy ang ating mga kababayan na may intellectual disability, hindi natututukan kung sakali man na meron silang skill sa sports, sa arts and design, or yung tinatawag na mga skill-based na technical or vocational, no? More or less, nakafocus tayo sa academic. And kung titingnan natin, based on definition, ang ating mga kapatid o kababayan na may intellectual disability, sadyang mahina po ang kanilang pag-unawa or yung pagtanggap, yung functional nila, especially sa cognitive. Kaya naman, ang TESDA, naglabas din ng report kung saan gumawa sila ng mga pagkakataon na hindi man nakafocus sa academic needs ng bata, mabibigyan sila ng skill upang maging successful sila later in life. To discuss about the transition of someone with intellectual disability, masyado siguro kulang or maikli ang oras natin upang pag-usapan ito. Ngunit sa tingin natin ay masasagot ito ng ating ng tanong. Sa tingin ko naman, hindi naman ito tanong lamang ng mga magulang na may kamag-anak o may anak na intellectual disabilities. Ako bilang isang magulang, bilang isang magulang at anak, iniisip ko rin ito palagi, ano ang mangyayari sa ating mga anak, lalo na yung may mga intellectual disability kung tayo ay wala na. This is where our organization, the Philippine Association for Intellectual Disability, comes in. Pumupunta tayo sa mga government agencies to make sure that the policies are created para sa ikabubuti ng ating mga may intellectual disability. Another is meron tayong ginagawa na capacity building uh, alongside yung trainings, hindi lamang sa batang may intellectual disability kundi pati sa kanilang mga pamilya or sa mga guro. Hindi po porque nagtuturo po sa pribado or sa pampublikong sektor ay alam na rin kung minsan kung ano ang kailangan ng ating mga kababayan na may intellectual disabilities. So, pumapasok din tayo doon. I'm very happy to announce that our collaboration with government agencies such as NCTA ay nagbibigay ng opportunities dahil ito rin naman yung gusto natin. Ito yung kailangan ng ating mga batang may intellectual disabilities. If they are given, they are provided with opportunities, they will be successful later on in life. At hindi lamang naman yung sila ay maging productive member of the society, no? Iniiwasan din natin na sana hindi sila maging burden. Kasi alam niyo po, hirap na hirap ngayon ang isang bata o isang tao na may intellectual disability. Siya po ay nahihirapan dahil hindi lamang dahil sa kanyang kondisyon, kundi pati rin sa society na mapandingta. That's one of the reasons kung bakit tinanggal natin ang katagang mental retardation sa ating mga pananalita. We call it hindi siya politically correct kasi nga ginagawa itong parang pangungutya or pang-vilify sa mga batang o sa mga taong may intellectual disability. While the term mental retardation is, I believe, still the clinical part of it is still ginagamit pa rin siya, lalo na ng mga doctors, ng mga psychologists. Tayo sa society, tinanggal yan dahil naging hindi maganda ang naging karanasan ng ating mga babayan na may intellectual disability dahil ginagamit na ito bilang katatawanan or bilang pangungutya. Bilang pagtatapos, I just want to thank the DOH for having this awareness and also in collaborating with us in celebration of the National Intellectual Disability Week. Malaking karangalan na nandito sa inyong plataforma upang magpahayag ng aming adhikain na makatulong sa ating mga kababayan na may intellectual disabilities. Maraming salamat po sa pagkakataon.
Maraming salamat din po, Teacher Al, for sharing with us not just the intellectual disability awareness but its transition po to adulthood. For the second part naman po of ating Kapihan with Media, we will now tackle the intellectual disability in children. And to discuss this, please help me welcome a fellow in child neurology of the Child Neurology Society of the Philippines, who is also a medical specialist in Quirino Memorial Medical Center and assistant professor of Chinese General Hospital Colleges, College of Medicine, Dr. Michelle C. Good afternoon po, Doc.
Good afternoon po. Let me try to share my screen now.
Sure po.
Share the screen. Yes. Sige. So thank you for inviting me to share this talk about intellectual disabilities in children. It's a very broad topic, no? Talagang there's maraming pwedeng reason para magkaroon ng intellectual disabilities and maraming mga complications din ito. It's a very broad topic, no? Because intellectual disability is actually one of the developmental disabilities only. There are a lot and marami sa mga symptoms nila can overlap such that minsan it's quite confusing as which is which and minsan they can coexist with each other. So, but developmental disabilities, let me talk about that first, no, is a group of disabilities that begin before the age of 18, so during a developmental period. And the problem here is that it is lifelong and can impact daily life of the person having it. So, yun yung problem din sa intellectual disabilities natin. It's lifelong. Okay? So some of the other disorders we can see here sa slide na to, learning disability, vision impairment, autism, ADHD, okay? And 1 in 6 children, no, 3 to 17 years old, can have the developmental disabilities. So usually when we say developmental disabilities, it's during the time na very sensitive pa yung brain, no, to any kind of traumatic event or any kind of influence. So when we say brain development, it's very important na ma-realize natin that the brain starts to develop mula pa yung unang pagbuntis ni mommy. So beginning the first week to first month of development, yung brain ang unang nagde-develop. And any problem that occurs even during pregnancy can cause ultimately a developmental disorder and ultimately intellectual disability. So ito yung mga factors na pwedeng mag-cause ng intellectual disability or other developmental disorders. There are factors that we cannot really change. Yung sa genetics na yun, ganun lang siya pinanganak. That's just the way it is. But then we have to look into the non-genetic factors, no? The factors that we can kind of avoid or kind of mitigate, no, mabawasan yung risk nila na magkaroon ng developmental disorders. So ito yung mga infections, especially brain infections. Ito yung mga bagay na pwede natin i-prevent by giving enough supplementation, or ito yung mga bagay that we can prevent by avoiding exposure to certain risk. So we'll talk about all of that later. But syempre, right now po kasi, no, very aware ang population sa iba-ibang sa developmental disorder. But usually, ang medyo nag-boom kasi ngayon is autism. So maraming lalapit magsasabi, ito, may ganito anak ko, baka autism, baka ganyan. So it's very important for us to know, no? Like I said, nag-o-overlap yung mga symptoms nito. So ano ba yung signs ng intellectual disability? So, intellectual disability, tulad din ng sinabi dati ni Sir, na before mental retardation siya because it's dependent mostly on the IQ level, the intelligence quotient level. But currently, to make it more inclusive and more inclusive and more open for intervention, mas pinocus na ang intellectual disability in terms of yung adaptive functioning, yung capability nila to adapt to their environment despite any problem in their intellectual functioning. So we see here na based on IQ, no, nandito tayo sa intellectual disability with an IQ of 70 or below. Let me just share my slides again na naputo lang.
Sure po. Doc, you may share it again po. Ayan. Naputol po tayo
So,
kanina, Doc,
yun
dun
nga sabi
sa
ko, tulad ng nabanggit ko kanina about intellectual disabilities. It is something that occurs at during a developmental period. So that's actually one of yun. Yan. First na first ways to diagnose. It cannot be diagnosed when they're much older na. Dapat during childhood siya na-diagnose. Okay. And yung tulad ng sabi natin kanina, no, kadalasan, there are identifiable causes. So one of those would be genetic conditions. They're just born with it. Okay. Or yun na nga, there are toxins during pregnancy that can also alter the genetic makeup of an individual as they are while they were still in the mother's womb. And then we have complications of pregnancy. So, siyempre, dito papasok yung good healthcare, no? Good obstetric care during pregnancy, prenatal check-up. Kailangan, very important yan. And then, we have those diseases, maybe. So, very
apologies po, we're just having a technical difficulty, but Doc C will return once her internet connection is okay. Ayan. Sige po, Doc. Please proceed po. No worries, kasi nangyayari po talaga ang mga technical difficulties.
yan. So, ito yung sinasabi kanina na higher ang intellectual disability in low income countries and maybe in the rural area, no? Because also of these factors, there's a lack of healthcare. There may be some malnutrition going on. There are exposure to hazards, especially if they don't know na hazardous pala yung mga hinahandle nila na mga products, no? Yung mga chemicals, ganyan. And then, of course, to some degree, there are those who are neglected or have lack of emotional and educational enrichment. So those are the things that are actually preventable. But then again, we have to realize also that there is a large majority of cases of intellectual disability na unknown. We still cannot pinpoint, no, or multifactorial, that we cannot pinpoint really the cause. Okay. So of that, makes it one very complicated problem to deal with also. So the other way to find out if one has intellectual disability is because these children will present with deficits in adaptive functioning. And in intellectual disability, we have severity categories. And the severity categories are just dependent on their ability to become independent in their daily skill. Okay. Yung deficits in adaptive functioning, these are the skills that they need in order to reach yung mga socio-cultural standards. Okay, they have to be independent in their ability to be able to function in a community setting for them to have some sort of social responsibility. Okay, so this is how they cope with whatever life will demand, and it's dependent not only on the social, cultural background, it's also dependent on their age level. So dito papasok yung mga developmental milestones and developmentally appropriate behaviors when we talk about adaptive functioning. So for young children, the more significant or the more noticeable na symptom are actually those involving impairment in adaptive functioning rather than the IQ problem. Okay? And in adaptive behavior, now we have conceptual, social, and practical adaptations. Conceptual are those involved, of course, in school. So parang doon tayo mas nagfo-focus, no, na itong report ni teacher, kaya they come for check-up because nagrereklamo na si teacher na bakit ganyan-ganyan si anak, hindi siya nagsusulat, hindi siya nagbabasa, hindi siya maka-behave, ganyan-ganyan. So these are conceptual adaptive behaviors for young children. Social naman are those that involve their ability um, to develop relationships, okay? Communication, develop friendships, follow the rules for the community. So those are social. And practical naman has to do with the functional independence. Kaya ba niyang alagaan sarili niya? No, more or less. Hygiene-wise, feeding, dressing, mga ganyan. Kaya ba niyang asikasuhin ang sarili niya? Okay, so those are the problems in this adaptive behavior, no? Even just one domain, whether conceptual, social, or practical, can already qualify a patient to be intellectually disabled, as long as the third also is fulfilled, the third criteria, which is intellectual functioning. So intellectual functioning naman has to do with higher function, reasoning, abstract thinking, judgment, pag-analyze, pag-comprehend ng mga pangyayari. So those are intellectual functioning. And again, the categories for intellectual disability is based on their ability to be independent as well as the IQ range. Okay. Mas binibigyan lang ng diin or significance yung adaptive behavior. Okay. So the IQ naman, no, the thing is with the IQ, the adaptive behavior, more or less you can observe that in young children. But in terms of IQ kasi, although you can do the IQ tests in very young children, but it's not kasi for developing or less may mas set na yung expectations kung anong dapat nilang nagagawa in terms of their intelligence. Okay? So the problem with young children na 5 and below, or below 5, is that they may not be able to do the IQ testing. So parang hindi mo sila mailalagay pa sa category of intellectual disability. So what happens is they end up being put in the category of global developmental delay for very young children. Okay? And global developmental delay is basically their inability to reach milestones for an expected age range in 2 or more developmental domains. Okay? So the developmental domains are gross motor, fine motor, speech and language, cognitive and social milestones. Kailangan ma-reach nila yan. If 2 or more, then global developmental delay na siya. Potentially, they may grow older and eventually have a diagnosis of intellectual disability. Okay. So these are some of the signs, early signs of global developmental delay that may be ultimately intellectual disability. So from birth to 6 months, you can see some infants or babies that do not suck properly. They have convulsions, they have seizures, or they may be stiff or flaccid or parang walang parang malambot yung katawan nila. Okay. So other symptoms may be growth is slower than usual, even after a few months of age. Parang newborn pa lang siya. So talagang there's a developmental issue. The child may cry continuously and cannot be comforted, or they may not be crying when they actually should be. Okay? Or the baby sleeps too much and has no interest in their surroundings, tulog lang ng tulog. Okay? So other symptoms would be parang less active siya, no? Parang wala siyang masyadong pake. O kaya iba yung iyak nila. Sometimes we describe it as a cat-like cry or very high-pitched na cry. Okay. So hindi dapat ganun pag baby. Or they do not get excited by outside stimulus. May linalaro ka na sa kanila, parang wala lang, hindi nila nakita or hindi nila narinig. Okay. And then they may also have strange eye movements. Hindi sila nag-fixate sa'yo, hindi ka tinitingnan, o kaya may kakaibang kilos yung mata nila, o kaya nakatulala lang, they do not look at anything in particular, or they may have strange body movements. Okay. So pag meron tayong mga ganitong mga signs or symptoms, then it's a good idea to have immediate checkup na, okay, rather than wait. For older infants and young children naman, then usually it's late development of motor skills, late language skills, difficulty in achieving or mastering in certain personal care skills. They may have difficulty remembering things. They have lack of curiosity or interest. They may have behavioral problems. Yung grabe silang umiyak or grabe silang magwala. And then they may have difficulty in following commands, directions, difficulty associating consequences with actions they have done, or difficulty understanding rules of the household or rules of the community. And they may have, and in older children, it comes out they have a hard time problem solving. Yung step by step na gagawin, hindi na magawa. Step 1 lang kaya nila, hindi nila masunod-sunod. Wala silang problem solving or logical thinking. Or persistence of infantile behavior. These are the usual symptoms in older infants or in young children. Now, meron naman yung mga severe and profound intellectual disabilities. These ones naman are usually, they have accompanying medical needs. They may have accompanying cerebral palsy, epilepsy. They may have accompanying attention deficit, impulse control, aggressiveness, autism disorder. So, these are yung sinasabi ko kanina na pwedeng maghalo-halo sila. No, kaya medyo complicated din minsan when we assess intellectual disabilities. And kadalasan parents will also ask about the level. So the level is basically an indication now of how much support is needed. And it's important because tulad ng sabi kanina, we want to have support, government support in place. And of course, not all intellectual disability is created equal. Meron those who need just mild support. Meron naman those na talagang heavy support na pati family kailangan mong isupport dahil sobrang maraming pangangailangan sila. So for those with mild and moderate intellectual disability, relatively they can be taught to be self-sufficient and they can be taught or they can get used to being in a community and being responsible in community. But for those with severe and profound intellectual disability, those are the ones that may have shorter life expectancies and they usually need all full-time 24/7 care. Okay. So the usual questions naman would be, what can I do? Kasi ito yung paano kung papatalinuhin ang anak ko para wala siyang intellectual disability, para wala siyang global developmental delay? Well, of course, there's no magic pill to take to make someone more intelligent. So we talk about concepts, It's important to know na tulad ng sinabi kanina, even at pregnancy, the brain is already developing. So the fastest period of brain development is is from before birth, okay, up to 2 years old. And this is the first 1,000 days. So as a pediatrician also, ito yung ina-advocate namin that the first 1,000 days wherein a child is most vulnerable and can develop a lot of disabilities when something happens. We have to take care of them very well. Okay. So 90% of a child's brain development happens before the age 5. So cautionary ito sa mga nag-iisip na bata pa yan, antayin natin, baka mag-improve pa yan. We don't want to wait and see, no? We want to do something about it because it's the period of a child's greatest potential. Such that pag ginawa mo lahat ng potential to make them smarter, to make them more capable, then you're doing them a service. Okay, so yung gusto natin makita in terms of community support and as well as family intervention. So early detection, don't just wait and see. You have to screen. Parang screening and surveillance are two of the things that can us give them early intervention and avoid further disability. So screening is usually done at child visit, kasabay ng vaccination, no? Usually nagsiscreen na tayo for any developmental disorders, intellectual disability being part of it, and global developmental delay. So these are usually done at 9 months, 18 months, 24 months, and 30th months. So ideally, when they come for vaccination, may kasabay na screening for them to see if they are hitting their milestones para we can intervene already. Now, surveillance naman is for those na may high risk. If you know that your child, no, nanganak ka, high risk na siya. Preterm siya, o kaya nahirapan kang ilabas, nangitim siya, na-admit siya, na-intubate siya, natubo siya, then there already should be surveillance in place. Kasi very subtle lang ang signs ng child with developmental delay. So for those with so ito usually yung mga surveillance is done in the very early stage. 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, 4 month, chine-check na yan periodically to see if they are developing at par with children their age. Okay. So, what are the other things that we can do? So sabi ko nga kanina, during pregnancy. So this one, during pregnancy, from conception to before birth, then we see these problems cropping up that can cause intellectual disability. So what can we do to prevent this? Okay, as an individual lang, no? As an individual, then always prepare for your pregnancy. Get early and regular prenatal care. And this is even before you plan to get pregnant, you're already preparing for the pregnancy. Hindi pag nandyan na, no? Even before pine-prepare na. And for expectant mothers, of course, we want them to have healthy lifestyle. Avoid exposure to toxins. So very important dito, lalo na right now, we're in a community or in a society that is throw away or very convenience. Ang convenience directed ang society natin. Everything is instant. Okay, so there could be a lot of chemicals involved to make your life instant. Plastics, so mga preservatives, additives. So those are the things that we want to be wary of when we're pregnant to avoid certain toxins going into the child's brain. And of course, avoid potential infections. So marami ding mga parents who are not aware still of infections during pregnancy that can affect the fetus. Okay, so this can be passed on by exposure to even cat feces, no? Mga poops ng mga pusa, yung German measles, yung chickenpox. So those are infections that can affect a fetus and cause them to have developmental delays and profound intellectual disability. Okay. So after birth naman, so we see that after birth, no, during the first 5 years, 90% of the brain is developing at the first 5 years. So during this time, no, they can be very sensitive to brain infections and neurological conditions, toxic exposure, malnutrition, micronutrient deficiencies, environmental deprivation, child abuse. These are very vulnerable, these very young children. So what we need to do, of course, is also to promote responsive caring relationships to help them learn skills for their development. breastfeeding is very important. During the first 1,000 days breastfeeding, we advocate for that. Provide nutritious foods, reduce sources of stress. So ito syempre, there's also a community set up din dapat dito for children who are neglected, for children who have malnutrition, for children who are experiencing family abuse. So syempre, this can contribute din to intellectual disability because it lessens the capacity of the brain to grow to its maximal or to its maximal level. And of course, we want to give these children, young children, safety and security, good routine, sleep, exercise. Okay. So, mga health-related concerns. So, to reiterate that, no, kasi maraming hindi nakakaintindi din noon sa napansin ko with a lot of the patients I've been talking to. The human brain develops very quickly during the age of 2 to 3 years, very quickly. So here we see this, that the language development, cognitive functions, lahat yan starts at very early age. Foundation yan. Foundation nila yan. And you cannot build if you do not have foundation. So when a child does not receive enough sensory or intellectual input to keep them engaged or aware of their surroundings, we see structurally that the brain has lower volume and they have lower attention span and they have lower intelligence. So it does affect intelligence. So these are the things that we can do to help mitigate or lessen the impact. Okay. So screen time is an influence as well. Because pag prolonged screen time use, and there's a rapid, very rapid screen change or image changes, no? This teaches the brain to expect higher levels of stimulation and leads to inattention. And it deprives also children of the experiences that they need in order to learn, in order for proper brain growth. Kasi hindi nila nagagamit yung areas na kailangan mag-develop because they're so passively watching the screen. So ito yung mga nagiging problems in the more recent period. Okay. So children also need a variety of nutrients in their diet to supplement and support brain development. So wala nga in mga instant. Hindi kasama yung mga instant. The supplementations will help. Of course, right now, compared to before, we have the iron supplementation, we have the iodine supplementation. So definitely, these programs of the DOH before did help with the mitigation of intellectual disabilities. But then, we want to also make sure that we are reducing sugar levels, especially for these very young infants, because it has been shown that too much sugar during this period, for long periods of time, for prolonged intake of sugar during a very young age, will affect learning ability, memory, and ability to concentrate. So it's shown that children who often have a pattern of snacking, processed food, sugar, they have smaller white matter volume in the brain by the time they're 10-year-olds. So this is opposed to those children who have a higher quality diet. They're eating grains, they're eating dairy fats, they're eating meats. These are the children that eventually, as they grow older, show better brain development, more folding of the brain, more surface area of the brain. And this helps with intelligence also. Okay. So young children also need to build their body. Physical activity is also important to help build intelligence. Again, this is one of the things that we can look into as a community. Okay. That motor skills, okay, we're not talking about them running around and doing whatever. We're talking about directed skills, directed physical activity. Now, they are going into structured sports. Someone is teaching them how to balance. Someone is teaching them how to tumble properly. Diba? These measures can improve concentration and attention. They enhance working memory and verbal learning and memory. Okay. So this is a picture that shows that for children on the top part, for children who underwent physical activity now after school, they have a structured program after school. The top two heads show that a larger area of the brain is being activated after 9 months. Okay? So mas maraming connections na nangyari. So opposed to those children who did not have that, they were quite sedentary, they were quite passive, they did not have enough physical activity. So you can see that the lower two pictures naman has less stimulation for the brain. Okay. So through varied sensory experiences, the brain understands the relationship with the outside world and develops connections to that. So this physical activity will also keep your stress hormones at a low level so that your brain can use the energy to develop more important areas. So children do need to be taught these physical skills. No, they do not learn that on their own. They need someone who is more knowledgeable in that to teach them how to do. The other one naman is sleep. Okay. So sleep is very important for children as well. And I think since there's been increase in work from home, increased use of laptops during the evenings, diba? So kids cannot sleep as well as they did before. No? Kasi to sleep very well, you need a quiet environment. You need a very relaxed environment. No? So children need longer periods of sleep. And why is that? Because the development of the brain do take place when they sleep. Whatever they experience while they're awake consolidates when they sleep and become memories and become learning processes. If they don't get enough sleep, lagi silang deprived, then it's linked with cognitive difficulties. It's linked with mental health problems. It's linked with poor problem solving and poor decision making. So this also contributes to a decrease in the intelligence or decrease in the developmental development of children in their brain. Okay. So what if? So these are the things that we can do not to kind of give to children. So, but what if my child already has developmental delay? Nandiyan na tayo, meron na, disabled ang anak ko, intellectually disabled ang anak ko. What can I do? Okay. So, again, it's early assessment and early intervention. Na-screen ka na surveillance na natin na kung ano, na high risk ang anak mo, na ganito ang problem niya, meron siyang delay. So, we need to assess further. So assessment is a diagnostic process, intellectual disability as well. So one of those programs would be newborn screening. So there's still a lot of our countrymen who are not able to have newborn screening. No, maybe it's not available in their area. Maybe they're born at home and they did not go to the doctor to have newborn screening. So these are metabolic tests and other testing such as check for other brain malformations. Ganyan. So these can help in us to mitigate as well and to intervene. Kasi we want to always look for treatable causes of intellectual disabilities and treat it to avoid further disability. Treatable causes. Kaya very early assessment is very important. And of course, early interventions. And intervention may include any kind of therapy, assistive device, nutritional services, school services, and of course, family support. There should also be family support because it's very difficult to care for someone, especially those with profound intellectual disabilities. So these are included in intervention. Okay. But what can caregivers and parents do at home? Learn everything about intellectual disability as much as possible to advocate for better services, to advocate for better healthcare. Encourage a child's independence. So we have to let them do things even though they're adaptively challenged, intellectually challenged, because we let them do it. And they do it again and again and again. Then it comes a point that they don't have to think about it. They can do it automatically. And that helps them with functioning in a society, with functioning in a community. almost done. So, so support groups. What else can they do? They can also use language that matches the child's understanding. So parang ibababa mo sarili mo to their level in order to be better able to teach them because we already know they cannot understand everything. Diba? So give them extra time to learn new skills. Allow
Doc C, apologies po, nawala po sila.
nakikita nila, nahahawakan nila, na-experience nila. And be very consistent and clear with what you expect them to be able to do. You have to model the behavior that you want to see. Hindi pwedeng sa school gagawin nila, sa bahay hindi na nila gagawin. Kasi may iba nang gagawa for them. And then you identify structures to support them. So in closing, no, we help people with intellectual disability by providing patience, using clear communication, encouraging independence, and being very supportive, and to seek professional guidance as well in order that they can get early intervention, early assessments. Thank you. Thank you again. Medyo mahaba pero it's really a lot to cover for just one topic. It's very broad.
No worries po, Doc C. We understand po and maraming salamat din po sa pagbibigay ng kaalaman sa ating mga kababayan hinggil po sa intellectual disability in children po, no? Its signs and symptoms, yung importance din po ng early assessment and interventions, as well as the healthy lifestyle before and during pregnancy to avoid certain toxins, kaya pa nasabi nyo, infections that can affect fetus that can cause them developmental delays. Doc C and Teacher Al, hindi ko na patatagalin at tayo po ay tutungo na sa huling bahagi ng ating Kapihan with Media na question and answer portion. For the first question po, this is for Teacher Al. How can the transition to adulthood be better facilitated po for individuals with intellectual disabilities considering po yung factors ng education, employment, and independent living?
Thank you, Ma'am Lynn. May kasabihan tayo, it takes a community to raise a child. Hindi lamang ito kaya ng isang sektor. Kaya katulad nung binanggit kanina ni Doktora, ang society, ang mga therapists, ang mga special education teachers, in fact, even those who are yung mga security guards, all of them are needed, no? Pag yung sa transition ng bata. Kaya palagi natin sinasabi, bigyan natin ng opportunities. Mainly because ang mga bata, lalo na itong mga may intellectual disability, it takes time for them to process. Parang ang ganda na explanation ni Doktora kanina, no? Meron pa mga categories. Pero para sa atin kasi, if we continue to provide them with opportunities, I think they will have a better chance na maging successful later on. Mahihirapan sila, yes, pero kapag bigyan natin ng pagkakataon, sa tingin naman natin, pwede naman sila makaangat ng konti o mas maganda yung kinabukasan nila.
Maraming salamat po, Teacher Al. For the second question po, it's for Doc C. Is it possible to know or detect po if an unborn child will have an intellectual disability? Is it hereditary po?
So I think naman kanina nabanggit ko ibang parts about this. So prenatal checkup. Because during prenatal checkup, they do some of the screening tests for Down syndrome, We do screening tests for congenital malformations. Okay. Now, if you have issues about kung hereditary yan, because someone in the family already has it, si ganyan-ganyan, meron din, ganyan, namana ba niya to? Then there are actually currently, there are actually genetic testing available for those with global delay and for those with intellectual disability, especially ones that are not identified. Walang nangyari, malinis ang birth history niya, malinis ang medical history, walang problema, pero ganyan siya. So, there are genetic tests. But again, like I mentioned kanina, sometimes it's still not known. We end up with a dead end na wala. So, yun yung na kung hereditary, maganda lang sa genetic test, if it's hereditary, is kung may nakita, then you can have an idea if another member, like another offspring of yours, has the risk of developing the same problem.
Thank you very much po, Doc C. For the second question po for Teacher Al, what challenges naman po does individuals with intellectual disabilities typically face during the transition po from young to adulthood, and how can society and support systems address this kind of challenges po?
Two things that I see na humahadlang sa mga batang may intellectual disabilities are the misinformation and the uninformed, no? Yung iba kasi hindi nila alam na meron palang posibilidad na yung batang ito ay merong intellectual disability, but still patuloy pa rin sila na pinupuwersa yung bata na ipagawa yung hindi naman niya kakayanin, tulad na sinabi ni Doktora, merong yung sa cognitive, yung sa functionality, at saka yung sa conceptualization. So kung uninformed ang society, kailangan natin magbigay ng awareness. Again, meron din kasing mga misinformation. So gusto din natin, kaya nagugustuhan natin ito coming from the developmental pediatrician, sa doctor katulad ni Dr. C, kasi ako mismo marami ako natutunan ngayon. May mga misconception tungkol sa kanila, kaya kapag naririnig natin sa mga specialists, sa mga experts, then we are more than better to share it with others, na magbigay tayo ng awareness. Ang nakikita natin na hadlang sa society, Ma'am Lynn, is yung lack of awareness, no? Kasi kapag hindi natin alam kung ano ang meron sila or ano ang kakulangan nila, paano tayo makapagbibigay ng para sa kanila? So, yun ang nakikita ko. I'm sure marami pa, pero for now, that's the tip of the iceberg, ika nga, na parang mas magandang bigyan natin ng pagtuunan natin ng pansin, ang magbigay tayo ng awareness sa society para hindi mabaliwala yung mga kababayan natin may intellectual disabilities.
Ayan, tama po, no? Kaya sana nakakatulong din po yung Kapihan with Media para mas mapalaganap po natin and maiwasan yung misinformation. Mapalaganap, when I say this, yung mga impormasyon kagaya po na nasabi kanina ni Doc C, yung mga signs and symptoms para sa mga nakikinig nating kababayan, kapag meron pong sintomas yung mga ating mga anak o yung mga ating pamangkin nitong mga nabanggit ni Doc C, ayun po, early detection is the best na pwede po natin gawin. Ayan. So, for the second question naman po for Doc C, how can signs of intellectual disability among children be differentiated po with those who just exhibit different behaviors with learning?
So like I said kanina, the signs and symptoms oftentimes they will overlap talaga. Kasi meron mga developmentally appropriate behaviors din that when they go beyond that certain age, hindi na siya appropriate. So minsan the appropriate behaviors na may misinterpret din as something na problem, di ba? But then yun na nga, through time din. Kaya nga nandyan tayo yung we cannot diagnose intellectual disability sometimes in very young children. Not unless talagang profound or there are medical conditions na alam natin Yun talaga ang problem niya, no? So we go with global developmental delay and we continue surveillance kasi alam natin at risk na sila, binabantayan na. And habang binabantayan, there are already interventions at place in the family and even in the community.
Thank you very much po, Doc C. We are down to the last two questions po. For the last question for Teacher Al. Teacher Al, what innovative approaches po have organizations adopted to engage the public and encourage active participation in supporting individuals or Filipinos with intellectual disabilities as they transition to adulthood?
Yes, ma'am. The Philippine Association for Intellectual Disabilities is now using social media to raise awareness kung ano man yung mga activities natin para maging involved, no? Hindi lang kasi ito para sa bata eh. If we look at it, ang problema or issue with the child is issue ng family. And ang issue ng family is issue for the society. Kaya maganda na magkaroon tayo. We use the technology, gamitin natin sa tamang pamamaraan. May mga adaptive devices para sa kanila na makatutulong para makapagtrabaho sila or makatulong sa pamumuhay nila. The organization is also collaborating sa lahat ng aspeto sa government, sa private, sa public institutions so that mabigyan natin ng opportunities. It's all about opportunities for them. Bigyan natin sila ng maraming opportunities para nang sa ganun magkaroon sila ng... Ang tinitingnan kasi natin dito, Ma'am Lynn, may maganda silang kinabukasan. Kasi ang kinabukasan ng isang batang may intellectual disability, it affects the society as well. Kahit na isa lang yan, kailangan natin pagtulungan. Kasi pag naging, hindi kasi magandang pakinggan, pag naging burden yung bata, damay-damay lahat tayo. Pero kung magtutulungan tayo para doon sa isang bata na yon, I'm pretty sure maganda ang effect nun sa society natin.
Yes, and naniniwala din ako, Teacher Al, na kapag nagtulungan tayo, hindi lang isang bata, hindi lang bilang sa kamay na bata ang ating matutulungan, kundi marami pa. Ayan. Ano naman, for the last question naman po, kay Doc C, can intellectual disabilities among children be addressed po through home-based measures, especially for those who cannot afford to get their children consistent professional help, lalo na po yung mga nakatira sa mga far-flung areas?
So usually what I tell my parents, regardless what disability the child has, even if the child does not have a disability, very important yung anong nangyayari sa bahay. Because it is the building block of who they are when they go out into the community. Pag sa bahay, ganito siya, wala siyang alam. Pagdating sa community, you don't expect may alam siya. Wala din siya alam, lalo nang walang alam. So very important yung home-based measure. The therapy, kasi we're talking about consistent professional help is more of the therapy, the intervention na. The therapy, I tell them all the time, is they can help you. They can advise you. Because they know what to expect already. They know how to help the child already. Ikaw natututo ka pa lang. Kasi first time mo to, maybe first time, maybe second time. But sila alam na nila kasi yun pinag-aralan nila. So they can help you. So if you cannot get consistent professional help, then at least get some help para ma-advisean ka. You do it at home. And then you come back for follow-up na lang siguro. It's better than nothing. It's better than you figuring it out yourself. So very important din na meron tayong supports in place that can give them. And sabi nga ni Sir kanina, yung online, we're using social media. So especially during the pandemic, therapists will do their therapy sessions online na rin. Tinuturuan yung parents how to do it. So those are some of the things that can mitigate the situation.
Thank you so much po, Doc C. Before we officially end our Kapihan session today, May I ask for your takeaway messages na lang po. Unahin po natin kayo, Doc C, and then Teacher Al.
So I think we talked about it a lot already. No, very important is early intervention. And beyond early intervention, very important is the community support. So sana sana yung mga magulang dyan, pag nakikita nyo na parang may problema ang anak nyo, no, pa-check up nyo na kaagad. Or even better, no, very accessible naman sa social media. Marami kayong pwedeng mabasa. Tingnan nyo ano ba ang dapat na nagagawa ng anak nyo sa edad nila. No? Anong dapat nagagawa nila and kung kayang gagawin. Kung sa tingin nyo, bakit hindi niya kaya? No? Yung nakikitang, yung sinasabi na normal na dapat nagagawa, hindi niya kaya, then pa-check up nyo na, pa-screen nyo na. So, yun yung very important dyan. Early screening, early detection, early intervention, and continuing support.
Maraming salamat po, Doc C. For your takeaway message po, Teacher Al.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Tulad ng sinabi ni Doktora, mahalaga yung early intervention. And bilang isang guro, kami rin ay we encourage parents, no, hindi yung nakasanayan natin na masyado pang bata kaya hindi ipapasok kaagad. Meron po tayong tinatawag na early childhood care and development. Sabi kasi nung iba na ito daw baka daw manawa yung bata dahil bata-bata tuturuan. Hindi po. Ang early childhood care and development ay nakafocus sa holistic development ng bata para ma-achieve niya yung developmental milestones, yung mga sinasabi nito. So, mahalaga po ito, early intervention. Kung kailangan po ng therapist, hindi po sila dapat ikahiya. Dahil the more na ikakahiya po natin yung bata, hindi natin sila mabibigyan ng intervention, ng therapy, ng special education, the more na lumiliit yung pagkakataon na mabigyan sila ng appropriate intervention. So please, parents, tanggapin natin, these children are God's gift to us, no? So sila ay biyaya, wag natin sila ikahiya, bigyan natin sila ng opportunities para hopefully magkaroon sila ng pagkakataon na mapatunayan sa sarili nila na kaya din pala nila, no? They'll become self-determined individual. Thank you very much, Ma'am Lynn. Thank you very much, Doktora.
Thank you po. So I think
Well,
beyond the intervention is prevention. And
Yes,
very
yes,
important
tama po.
prevention, of course.
Yes, Doktora.
maraming salamat po, Doc C and Teacher Al. Gayon din po sa Philippine Association for Intellectual Disabilities at Child Neurology Society of the Philippines sa pagpapaunlak po ng aming imbitasyon na kayo ay aming makasama sa Kapihan with Media ngayong araw. Sa ating mga tagapakinig, lagi po nating alalahanin na naririto po ang kagawaran ng kalusugan, hindi lamang po para masigurong healthy ang bawat Pilipino, kundi sapat rin na kaalaman sa iba't ibang mga sakit. Paano po ito maiiwasan o di kaya paano maibabatid ng gobyerno ang mga serbisyong pangkalusugan sa bawat Pilipino. Mula noon hanggang ngayon, ang kagawaran po ng kalusugan ay nagpapasalamat sa aming mga media partners sa patuloy na pagiging katuwang sa pagpapalaganap ng tamang impormasyon pangkalusugan. Muli ang inyo pong lingkod mula sa Kagawaran ng Kalusugan, ako po si Lynn Legarteja at magkikita-kita